week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email john@nufcmatters.com to arrange today. Good evening, welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by John Gibson, but still no Mal. Get well soon, Super Mac. That's from Rob Malcom, our designer. He knocked that together today, and I'm sure we pass on our best to Malcom. We can't give you any news because we don't know what the situation is. Let's just hope everything's in hand with him, John, and we'll soon have the best striker back in front of us.
Yeah, we wish him all the best. He's a dear friend, and well, he's a Newcastle legend, and so every Geordie will be wishing him all the very best. We've got to say that no information is possibly good information in terms of, that it can't be too dramatic. He's had a rough old time. I think it's called age, and I think it comes to all of us at some stage of life. But yeah, I'm hopeful he'll be back with us, and it would be wonderful to think that he would be sitting next to me at the Manchester City game, the next home game. That would be, that would be the great hope. But if we can just get him out and about a little bit, that would be fabulous.
Yep, it certainly will. We will crack on. We've got an hour, so if you've got any questions for me or Gibbo, get them in. Of course, we'll be looking ahead to the Fulham game and looking back just quickly at Wolves. First of all, John, another performance which probably from Newcastle's perspective, shows that they're still not firing on all cylinders. But by John, we found a way of winning.
Well, I mean, long may it continue. I mean, the first things first, you win matches, and then you want the icing on the cake with the performance to go with it. But we're third in the table. We're level with Arsenal. We're unbeaten. It's the best start since Kevin Keegan in 95-96 when he won his first four. And we go top on Saturday night if we win at Fulham because Manchester City host Arsenal, but it's on Sunday. So, I mean, even at this early start of the season, the chances of going top, and it's a winnable game we're facing, that's absolutely fabulous. I mean, we could be Spurs, the other team that plays vaguely in black and white. They will keep telling us how wonderful they're playing and passing sides off the pitch and all that, but, can't win in the league. So, do we want to be Spurs and be where they are, or do we want to be Newcastle and be where we are? We want to be Newcastle, of course we do. The ultimate's to get the performance to match the results, but results matter. And in all the games, we've had spells where we've looked a good team. We just haven't done it for an hour and a half.
Yeah, definitely that is the case. There was a question came in actually, which I'll take now, and that's just with regards to our results. Darren says, do you think we've been lucky with our results so far? Are you worried we'll get beat soon if we don't improve?
I I don't think we've got lucky. I don't think outside of Spurs, who are very vulnerable, as we've talked, that we've played any big opposition yet, and we're not doing that on Saturday. With utmost respect to Fulham, the test's going to come when we get Manchester City at home, isn't it? I mean, that's when the yardstick is going to come. And yes, you think that you're bound to get beat if you don't end up playing to the top of your form. Certainly, when the big sides come to town. But having said that, we haven't been a disaster in every game. We've had spells where we've looked a very, very good team, and the front guys have looked as if they can create problems, and we're finding ways to win. I mean, when we went down there to Wolves and conceded a very bad goal, there was about 4 or 5 players you can point the finger at, our players on the goal. But all of a sudden, we're coming out for the second half. We're 1-0 down, and Isak's off. I mean, you talk about Newcastle United. Look, Steve, the one bloke you probably can't afford to get injured, apart from Nick Pope, because the cover's not good at keeper, is your centre forward. So who gets a slap in the eye? Our centre forward. And with the false number 9 in the second half, and 1-0 down, we looked as if we were right up against it. Then we get 2 humdingers of long range shots. Yes, Shaw's was helped because it got a deflection off the guy's head, which took it just above the keeper. But if you don't buy a ticket, you don't win the lottery. And Shaw's been terrific for us. And then the finish of Harvey Barnes was absolutely outstanding. So we'll find wins to win and ways to win. And I don't think we particularly nicked it off them because they were pretty average. But we managed to get ourselves in front, and that's important. And if we do exactly the same at Fulham on Saturday, there'll be no complaints from me.
Yeah, and I mean the eye injury, which we're led to believe that Isak sustained, is now filtered its way down to his toe. John Craig Hope breaking a story today that Alexander Isak's injured his toe and could possibly miss the Fulham game. I mean, you couldn't script that lad at the minute, could you?
I mean, everything's going south, isn't it? It's gone from his eye to his toe. And of course, where we get all apprehensive is the last person that ended up with a toe injury was Harvey Barnes, who was out for weeks that become months. It's a worry, but it was also stated by Hopi that there's going to be a late call on him, which indicates a toe injury may not be too bad. And if you get a padded boot, and a jab, you can play through the pain. And they would then obviously leave him out at Wimbledon if he could play on Saturday and keep him in cotton wool for Man City, because you should get through at Wimbledon with Asula playing centre forward, because he played for Sheffield United and he should be able to play against the League Two side if he's not ready for the Premier League to be able to play on Saturday. So, we're still hoping Isak can make it. But I mean, we've been banging on this podcast. I've been banging on in the Chronicle and on other platforms about the situation at centre forward. And it is absolutely desperate. If you pay £10 million in your Premier League club for a striker, you get a third choice centre forward. And that's what we got with Osula, one for the future. And that's fine when he's number 3 in the pecking order if you've got a decent number 2. But if you've got a number 2 who's, is strength-wise is as good as a chocolate teapot, then you're in trouble. And the Callum Wilson thing is getting beyond a joke. I mean, when he's ready to come back, Steve, he's got no background. He's got no petrol in the tank because he's done virtually no preseason training. He's played in no preseason games or early season games, and he's now going to be out till October. I mean, he was injured without a game. It is a nonsense that we're actually relying on him to be our backup centre forward when we're going for Europe and going for domestic trophies. I mean, we're incredibly vulnerable. And while we got away with it at Wolves, we looked quite toothless up front, didn't we? Once Gordon, who had a fabulous first half at outside left, and Harvey Barnes had a fabulous second half at outside left, but we looked toothless through the middle when we didn't have Isak. So we are going to have a problem, and we've allowed that because it's been like that for a while. And I'm sick of saying Wilson's a good centre forward, because he is a good centre forward, but he isn't when he's sitting next to me and you, which is what he's doing regularly now. I mean, it's just a nonsense, isn't it? I mean, he shouldn't be our back. If we have ambitions for the Champions League, or at least for Europe, and for winning a domestic trophy, which we haven't won for so long, then you've got to have a bigger backup than a guy who's permanently injured and a rookie. And that's our trouble at centre forward. And it's come home to roost. We could have guaranteed, Steve, that it would, couldn't we? Wayne's is not going to be an outside left where we've got two absolute top class outside lefts. It's not going to be at right back or left back where we've got Livramento or Trippier and Lewis Hall or Lloyd Kelly. It's going to be at centre forward where we've got no cover. I mean, all we need is we go down to Fulham and Pope takes a smack in the mush, and because despite having 5 goalkeepers, we haven't got a good quality cover for him either.
Yes, let's hope that doesn't happen. As always on a night like this, get your questions in. John and I can wheel our way through them. And Alan Little, you're right. It has been such a sad week for football. Not only have we lost one of Aston Villa's finest players, of course, who passed away, Gary Shaw. We've also lost in world football Toto Scalacci, who, it has to be said, was the other star of World Cup 1990 in Italia, other than Gaza, with all the goals that he scored for Italy. That wonderful celebration he did is often repeated on various TV montages building up to the World Cup. And of course, we've lost one of our own in Steve Hardwick, who I know wasn't probably the most popular of goalkeepers, but nice fella, John, and somebody who certainly got a lot of praise and well wishes yesterday. Lots of people had some very kind words to say about Steve Hardwick.
Yeah, that's a good thing. He was a nice guy. He suffered because he was a Gordon Lee guy, and Gordon Lee didn't turn out to be the most popular guy at Newcastle United. He suffered because he followed our 1976 League Cup final side, Mike Mahoney, super goalie, the song, and very good mate of mine, Mike, and it was tough to follow him. And he played about 100 games for us. He had a tough time here. He got some stick from the terraces at the time. But he went off and had a career, and I was pleased for him in that point of view, mainly at Oxford. And he got 2 promotions at Oxford, I think 3rd division and the 2nd division. And he come back a few times and haunted us, Steve. He played for Oxford against us in the League Cup, and I think in a league game and that as well. And they got results against us. But, the bulk of his top career was really with Oxford, where he got a couple of promotions, etc., etc. And he hadn't a great career here, but he'll be remembered with fondness because he was a nice guy. He was almost as good a cricketer, as he was a footballer. He had a big obsession with the game of cricket, and played for us late 70s, early 80s, went off to America and then to Oxford and had a career. But sorry to see him going. At 68, he's no age, so that's a shame.
Yeah, we obviously pass our thoughts on to his family. Tom Dixon asked this question last night. I didn't get time to get round to it. He says, so a question for John. Is Fabian Shaw Newcastle's best value signing of the Premier League era? Bear in mind, he cost about 3 million, John.
For 3 million, you've got to say right up there. I mean, absolute quality. I've said, football's Cary Grant is Mr. Smooth, and he is exactly that. It's amazing to think we are having that conversation now, isn't it? When you think that when Steve Bruce was our manager, Fabian Shaw couldn't get in the side. Steve Bruce didn't want him in the side, and it looked as if he was going, and he was a walking mistake as a consequence because confidence was low, etc., etc. But he's absolute quality, and we have missed him. And I said, in all fairness, before the game at Wolves, I said, Kraft's done terrific for us. Well done to him. We're thankful, but there's no substitute for class, and the class is Fabian Shaw, not Kraft. And didn't he show that the way he come out with the ball, etc., at Wolves, and the strike for the goal he got. Yes, it took a slight deflection off a head, but he has scored a lot of goals like that over a lot of times with Newcastle United. And if you remember last season, scored a fabulous goal against Paris Saint-Germain, didn't he? You know, he's capable. His range of passing, short range and long range, is terrific. And per pound, they always used to say in the old days, Steve, that Kevin Keegan, who spent money ever so wisely, as Eddie Howe's done when Kevin Keegan was assembling the entertainers, he always said that pound for pound, Rob Lee at under $1 million was the best signing that he made, and that was some compliment when you think of all the signings he made that KK made for us. But I would think that Shaw would certainly stand out, value for money, pound for pound paid, because he's been fabulous.
Certainly has been. FJP Dave says, ask Gibbo, who's the most famous person he's met, and has he ever been starstruck? I think Spenny also asked a similar question, but most famous person that you've ever met?
Great question, because I've been very privileged to meet an awful lot of famous people through sport, through covering the World Cups and the Olympic Games, where you get to mix with the superstars, the two Ronaldos, the one from Brazil, and of course Cristiano Ronaldo, met Pele. I mean, Pele is one of the great names I met. I remember in 1970, after England had won the World Cup in '66, we went over to Mexico, where England were defending the trophy, and we were playing in Guadalajara, and Brazil were in the same group as we were in. And so I saw virtually every Brazil match bar one to when they won the whole tournament. And that's because I was away in Lyon with England for the quarterfinals when they got knocked out against Germany. And when I flew down from Guadalajara to Mexico City for the semifinals and the finals, I flew on the same plane as the Brazilian national side. And that was Pele. And Pele spent the whole trip, an hour and a half or whatever it was, the whole plane trip, standing in the aisle, signing autographs, having photographs taken with fans, and he was an ambassador at all the World Cups afterwards. So I met him regularly, and that was the greatest side I've ever seen. The 1970 Brazilian World Cup side that won the World Cup, and the greatest player I've ever seen. And there's lots of arguments about it. For me, was Pele. I used to have a wonderful argument with Tommy Cass, bless him, where Tommy Cass took George Best as the best player he ever saw, and I took Pele, and we argued, and we decided in the end that we were both right because they were both superstars. But there's also a case to be made out for Maradona, who I saw live, for Eusebio, for Cruyff. There's been wonderful, wonderful players. But you know what? I think and I've met a lot of film stars through Ian Lafreniere when I used to go down to Newcastle United matches. In London, we used to have a meal on a Saturday before we went to a game at lunch. And inevitably, Ian brought Ian McShane for the guy that played Lovejoy, whose dad played for Manchester United, for lunch with us. He brought Tom Courtney, who's now Sir Tom Courtney, come with me a lot of times to the Football Writers Association. Once a year on the Thursday before the FA Cup final, he come as my guest with Ian. And met James Mason and an awful lot of people. But the guy I think I was most starstruck by was Muhammad Ali, because he was my great, great superstar hero. He really was something extra special. And he come up to Newcastle and did a live television broadcast from Eldon Square in Newcastle. And I was with him behind the scenes for the whole of that, talking to him and getting him. And he's one of the few people in the whole of my life as an adult, Steve, that I actually asked for their autograph. As a kid, I asked for everybody for their autograph, Jackie Milburn, Joe Harvey, everybody. But as an adult, I asked Muhammad Ali for his autograph because, for me, he was the guy I was most starstruck about. Apart from Marilyn Monroe, for obvious reasons.
Barry says, John, I had a discussion the other night about our greatest goalkeeper. Who would your choice be? I agreed with Woody McFall's comments that it is Shay Given.
He's the one I've always taken. When I've done my lists of top 10 for each position in Newcastle, goalkeeper, right back, left back, etc., which the Chronicle have asked me to do, I've always made Shay Given my number one choice. He would have been our all-time appearance record holder if he'd stayed at Newcastle. It's ironically held by another goalkeeper, Jimmy Lawrence, who might surprise you to say that I didn't see him play, but that's because he played in 1905, and that was just before I was born. Not long before, but just before, so I never saw. But Shay Given was absolutely superb. We haven't always been blessed with good goalkeepers. We've got a decent goalkeeper now, believe you me. But I mean, in the top five, I would always put people like our 250s goalkeepers, Jack Fairbrother and Ronnie Simpson. I would put them in my top five. Willie McFall would be on the verge of making the five because he was such a long server with us. But Shay Given stands out above everybody else as the best keeper we've had, or the best goalkeeper I've seen. Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. Not sure Eddie would start Asula, even if Gordon was injured. Probably play Shaw up front. I guess Asula's just not Eddie Howe ready, is he, John? He's on the bench. He's enjoying the experience. He's travelling away. He's becoming part of the squad, which, of course, is essential. But, one would imagine sooner rather than later he'll get thrown into the fray.
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, Steve, if you're a top four or a top seven Premier League club, and we are, and you pay £10 million basic for a centre forward because that's the bottom line. There's add-ons if he progresses, then you know what you're getting. And what you're getting is potential. It's not the ready-made article. You can't buy a centre forward these days that's Premier League class for 10 million. That's a physical impossibility. He's bought for the future. He's bought because he's got scorching pace. They can see things that can develop with him, with the right coaching, with the right encouragement, and in Eddie and the Mad Dog and the rest of the staff, Graham Jones, etc., he's got a great chance of becoming that. But he's not anywhere near being ready-made at the moment. Eddie, by nature, is often doesn't put somebody straight in the side. He didn't do it with Bruno. He didn't do it with Gordon, etc., etc. So he's not going to do it with a rookie. But I mean, I would suspect that regardless of whether if Isak's not fit for Fulham, I would expect Gordon to play in a false nine. But equally, I would expect Asula to play at Wimbledon in the League Cup, whether Isak is fit or not. Because I think with Isak, with his eye, with his toe, with the fact that he's so important to us, with the fact that Wilson's not round, they wouldn't risk him at Wimbledon because you would put him on the bench if he was fit in case we're in dire trouble. But you wouldn't start him because Asula, even though he needs help and he needs coaching and he needs everything else, he should be able to play well against, with all respect to Wimbledon, against a League Two side, shouldn't he? With his quickness, etc., you would think he could play, and he would be ready to play against a League Two side, which is what Wimbledon are, because you would have fast wingers either side of him, whether it was Miggy or Murphy on one side, and whether it was Harvey Barnes or Gordon on the other side. You would have quick, good support. We would have a good midfield because we've got 4 or 5 midfielders that are experienced and can play there. So it wouldn't be a weak side, but I would think Asula would probably get his opportunity at Wimbledon.
Yeah, I would agree, John. I think that's the that's probably the consensus of opinion in the chat as well. Lots of people talking about goalkeepers. Pavel, of course, gets a good mention.
Yes,
Alan,
of course.
Good to see you in the chat as always, Alan. He says, I was Pab's postman in Gosford. He would peep his horn and wave to me every day. He was a total gent, as you guys will know. Lots of people talking about Anthony Gordon's car. He's getting a Hummer, which apparently is, what is it, 190? Is that right? £190,000 Hummer. He says, I can hear it 2 miles away from Darsley Park. And some of the people in the chat are laughing, saying, I can't wait for the stewards to park that. They struggle with burns at times, so that's going to be interesting as well. But footballers now, man, dear me, how some of them used to come on the bus. John
Jackie
says,
Milburn came on a bus, right?
Paul Toon says, John, do you think we should change the formation 4-2-3-1 to get support for Isak? I mean, that's when he's fit. I mean, formation changes, aren't something that he's gone in for a great deal, but as and when he has, and maybe that's something he might get thrust into at the weekend. All the talk is if Isak misses, then he might play Gordon up front from the start.
Yeah. Yes, he doesn't like to play. He certainly won't play two strikers, like in the old Super Mac Tudor days. He won't play 2 strikers alongside each other up front. He doesn't like to play too much. 1 striker and a 10 just off the striker. He doesn't play that too much. But when you think of Harvey Barnes giving him support in terms of goals, this is when Isak is regularly in the team. He wasn't in the second half at Wolves, but Harvey Barnes can do that. And if you put Willock into midfield, he runs strongly from midfield in support of a centre forward. He almost plays like a 10, Steve, because he's got that ability which is different to all our other midfield players. He carries the ball at pace and quite easily, and powers forward onto defenders and gives defenders problems in much more of a way than perhaps Joe Linton or Bruno or Tonali does. And while we're all waiting for Tonali to start in place of Sean Longstaff, because I think that still should have happened at Wolves. I think that Eddie, who's been wonderful, unbeaten for goodness sake, but I think he got his team selection wrong at Wolves. But Weve was brilliant is that he put it right at half time. He didn't wait to 60 minutes, 65 minutes, 70 minutes when it becomes too late. He put it right. But leaving Tonali out of that and leaving Barnes out of that, Barnes for Murphy and Tonali for Longstaff, I thought was mind-blowing, because I was in a bit of despair when I got the team sheet, because I thought that was 2 clangers. But we got Tonali and Barnes on very, very quick for the second half, and they changed the whole match. But the other guy, and everybody talks quite rightly about what Tonali and Barnes did at Wolves, Steve, but the other thing, almost under the radar, Willock helped change the situation, Willock coming into that midfield, driving with the ball at his feet, a natural athlete, attacks defenses quickly and with skill, and we know he can finish. He really can finish better than he has done. If you remember him when he first arrived on loan in Newcastle, and he was unknown to people, and he arrived late in the box, he caused mayhem. So there's a situation with Willock as well, to get support around Isak. I think we're all right when Isak's in the side. The problem is when we contemplate Isak being out of the side. That's when the massive problem. And you know why, Steve? Because Gordon, as the false 9, hasn't got the potency of Isak whatsoever. But we not only lose the fact that we haven't got a centre forward who's a natural finisher, we lose the wide player, because we've lost Gordon from wide. So it affects the side in 2 ways, Gordon going centre forward. We lose something out wide, and we lose something through the middle.
Yeah, certainly do. Just a mention to Kieran Trippier as well. I thought Kieran Trippier was superb when he came on.
Yep. It's his birthday today, I think.
It is, yeah.
Happy birthday to Kieran. I mean, when you look at it, it's fabulous, isn't it? Because we're unbeaten, we're 3rd top, we can go top on Saturday night, and yet we could make 5 team changes and not weaken the side. I mean, there's a case for Trippier starting ahead of Fermento. There's a case in some people's eyes for Kelly starting ahead of whole. There's a case for Tonali starting for Longstaff. There's a case for Joe Linton starting, dropping out for Willock. And there's what'll happen up front. You've got to start Barnes, in my opinion, and I would leave Murphy out. This is if Isak plays, and I would go Barnes, Isak, Gordon. So there's a lot of team changes, at least up for discussion, but not because we're terrible, because we're unbeaten, but because people are pushing for places, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
It is halfway through the show. Time for the ads. A big thanks to all our sponsors, Skips and Bins. You can find them at skipsandbins.com. Contact them, www.skipsandbins.com/contact. Say hello to low-cost waste disposal with pay-as-you-go and contract waste management. A big thanks to Mr. Vicky's Sauces, handmade in Cumbria. Their website, mrvickies.co.uk. Telephone 01768 210 102 or email info@mrvickies.co.uk. Thanks to our NUFC Matters fanzine sponsor, United Group Travel. Travel and Tourism Award winners 2024. There are no strangers on our tours, just friends you haven't met yet. All excursions included, 3-star plus quality hotels, no interchanges, a 2-crew driver and courier. It's a local family company, and you can find them at www.unitedgrouptravel.com or telephone 01670 632 460 or mobile 0791 666 4174. Big thanks to Media Arts for all the help with the technical side of things. And if you want to help support the channel, hit the subscribe button. We do 7 shows a week. Hit the thumb up under the video. That's the like button. It does help us grow. And click the share button. Help share to your social media. If you want to join the channel for as little as $1.99 a month, then hit the join button under this video today. We also help the food bank on this channel. Visit nufcfansfoodbank.co.uk. It takes you to the match day bucket where you can donate some money virtually. Some events for your diary in aid of Dementia Matters. The Long Sands will be reforming and be supported by Lilac Lane and the Chris Norris Band at the Cluny in Newcastle on Saturday, January the 4th, 2025. Tickets are £15 pre-sale from newcastlelegends.com. An evening with Peter Beardsley takes place at the Tyneside Irish Centre on the 10th of January 2025. Tickets available from newcastlelegends.com or from Woucher. And an evening with the Entertainers takes place on the 24th of January 2025. Telephone the box office 0844 249 1000 or visit the website tynetheatreandoperahouse.uk. And the Magpie Lounge at the Gateshead Leisure Centre is now open. 7 talk-ins for £99. Joe Allen will be hosting talk-ins with Lee Clark, John Anderson, Steve Howie, Darren Peacock, Supermac, Steve Watson, John Beresford, all between the dates of January and July. £99 for 7 talk-ins, newcastlelegends.com. And don't forget, you can subscribe to our NUFC Matters fanzine, £20 for 4 issues with all proceeds going to Dementia Matters. If you live overseas, it is £50 for 4 issues. To order now, go to newcastlelegends.com. And a big shout out to Will Scott, who has written a book called the 1992-1997 Kevin Keegan's Legacy, The Entertainers. Comes out at Christmas time, 30th of November. We are sticking that on our newcastlelegends.com website, and £1 from each sale is going to Dementia Matters. So an interesting Christmas idea for anybody out there of any Newcastle persuasion who wants to read about that era. Back to some questions, and we've got quite a few from different people. Alan says, you were very stylish, Gibbo, back in the day. I mean, you're still stylish now, but when you had your long flowing brunette locks, where did you buy your clubber from? No Primark back then.
No, in fact, most of the time I got it from Supermac shop. In the days in the 70s, Malcom with a partner had a shop just 500 yards from the Chronicle offices in the big market up. It was under the Swallow Hotel, the old Swallow Hotel, which used to be, I think it was the Empire or whatever theatre at one time. I mean, I remember going and seeing various acts on there, including Gene Vincent, who was terrific. Jim Vincent in the Blue Caps, absolutely great. And he had a shop under there, and I used to get a lot of my club in there because it was stylish, it was good stuff. And I remember they decked me out for the 1974 FA Cup final with a big black and white Ganzi, which had NUFC 74 on it. I mean, I looked like a stick of rock, but it was a lot of fun. And yeah, sure. I mean, you know, in those days, you either went with the flow or you were a dried up river. And I went with the flow, and a lot of fun was had by everybody in great days. And very occasionally, I get the old scrapbook out to look at them, and it's amazing I don't even recognize myself. I look like a totally different person now.
David Cook said he bought items from Supermarket Shop. I thought it was in Newgate Street Arcade. It was definitely under the Swallow Hotel, I believe. So
yeah, that's right. It was absolutely so. Absolutely.
Question for Gibbo. Oh yeah, like that's yeah, it's slightly different. This one. He says, question for Gibbo: have you ever met someone famous who was portrayed as a prat or a prima donna who turned out to be nice, and someone who was Mr. Nice but turned out to be up his own backside? No need for names. Well,
I mean, yes, there was. I mean, what I love about some of these questions is you've never considered them before, and you've got to think of them on the
on the spot.
Yeah. And I mean, yes, without a shadow of doubt. I mean, I know a lot of sportsmen who had a great reputation because they were wonderful sportsmen, but as people, you know, you wouldn't cross a road to shake their hands, because they were just not nice people at all. And there was a lot of wonderful people who were limited footballers, and that I found very difficult because part of your job is that you're paid by the Chronicle and you're working for the fans, giving them information first and foremost, and also you're considered an honest opinion. And what I have always found and wanted to do was differentiate between friendship and the opinion of a footballer as a footballer, because it is wrong, and I can tell you about many journalists, and no names, no pack drills, as the chap was saying, many journalists who have let managers off the hook because they like the guy personally. And one of the reasons they like them personally is because he gives them stories. Now, that to me is not a reason for not giving an honest opinion on whether he's good or not good. And without going into too much detail, but giving an example, because I think you've almost got to, an example for me was Steve Bruce. I knew Steve Bruce from his days at Wallsend Boys Club, when he was a young footballer down there with Peter Beardsley, and neither of them could find a Football League club. It was quite incredible when you think Peter Beardsley went on to be perhaps the greatest talent in Newcastle United's history, and Steve Bruce went on to be captain of a club like Manchester United, and yet they couldn't find clubs. And eventually, Steve got Gillingham, and Peter was turned down by Gillingham and by Oxford, Cambridge. And it was ludicrous. It was absolutely ludicrous. But Steve, when he was with Manchester United as a skipper, become a very close friend, was a very, very good centre half, arguably the best centre half that was never capped by England, and a good guy, etc., etc. When he became a manager, I thought he was a good manager at a certain level, but not at the top level. And I was hoping desperately that he wouldn't come to Newcastle United, because I didn't think he was the sort of manager we needed, or that he was necessarily capable of doing the job very well. And I was quite wanting him not to get the job when he was being touted for the Newcastle job during the Mike Ashley era. And I was hoping he would be put off by Mike Ashley and not take it because it was difficult to work with Mike Ashley. He wasn't. He took the Newcastle United job, and he'd already been manager of Sunderland, and it wasn't going to go down too well. And I just thought he wasn't made for the Newcastle job at all. But I was faced with a problem then, because he was a friend to a certain extent. He was certainly a wonderful acquaintance, etc., etc. But do I tell the truth, or do I say everything's wonderful because he's a friend of mine? You can't do that. You mustn't do that. You're a hypocrite if you do that, because you're paid to give your honest opinion. And if you like a guy, or you get on well with a guy, or he gives you stories and you say he's a wonderful manager for that, you're being untrue. And you're being untrue to your paymaster, who's the Chronicle, and you're being untrue to the fans who you're trying to tell the wrong story to. And I think sadly we ended up probably not friends, because Steve Bruce is going to take offence to how I handled him when he was manager here. Take offence to the criticism, and it wasn't easy to criticise because you knew the person. But you either do it with honesty, or you're not fair to yourself. And you know what? You damage your own reputation, Steve, if you pretend somebody's what you don't think they are. Then you're damaging your own reputation in the eyes of the fans, because the fans are no fools. They can see what they see, and they want honest opinions. And if you're giving a different opinion, they think one of two things: either you're doing it as a mate, or you're just ignorant of facts and you're just going along with it, and you're hopelessly out of touch. And I didn't want to be anything either. But that is a problem. I've had loads of wonderful friends in football, personal friends, lifetime friends, like Supermac, like Bob Moncur. I, I can go and name 100 guys. Um, and that is the wonderful thing about football, having that sort of relationship. But at the same time, you've got to be true to yourself and true to the people that are reading you, because they're expecting you to be truthful. So it can be difficult. It can be difficult. And it was difficult because I did tell the truth with Steve Bruce, as hard as it was. The truth as I saw it, and it did snap a relationship.
Councillor Spenny, he says, a question for Gibbo. Who is the most intelligent footballer that's played for Newcastle?
By intelligent, I presume that you mean not in football terms, like having a football mind, but as an intellect, if you like.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah.
I think that's what the guy is obviously talking about. Well, in theory, you would have to go for people like Alan Gowling, who was a university graduate, and come out of Manchester University, and had a good standing and was part of a group. You had the working lads at Newcastle United in the 70s, when 76 League Cup. You had the working class lads who were good old footballers like Supermac and Tommy Casti on one side, and then you had the intellects who did the Times crossword puzzle on the team coach, etc. Like Gowling and Nulty on the other side of things. So I would think you would have to look at people like Alan Gowling as the intellects of football. Whether that makes you a good footballer or not, of course it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't automatically follow you'll be a good footballer because you're an intelligent guy. But yeah, they're the guys that had the background. He was one of the guys that had the background, very much so.
Yeah, okay. Next question. It's from Alan Little. He says, as a journalist, have you ever been banned by the club, John? I can't imagine you have, but I wish Louise Taylor could be.
Well, actually, I have twice. I remember in the early days when the Joe Harvey sort of the 70s early days, when in those days, when I first started covering Newcastle, no, going back before that to the mid-60s, not the 70s, the journalists used to travel on the local journalists used to travel on the team coach to away matches. I was never a big fan of that because it almost put you in the pocket of the club, if you like, didn't it? Because you see things on the team coach, you're not allowed to report them because you're on the team coach at the behest of the directors and the manager, etc., etc. I only lasted about 3 games on the team coach before I turned up for the team coach on a Friday for an away game and was told, sorry, I couldn't get on. I wasn't banned from the press box or anything like that, but I couldn't travel with the team. It was a relief because I didn't want the problems that brought, and it brought a freedom with it, which is what I want. It didn't do as much good on the Friday afternoon, by the way, when I suddenly had to find out what the train times were to get over to Liverpool to report on Newcastle playing Everton. But as recently as during the decade and a half we had with Mike Ashley, I got banned by Newcastle United because I wrote things that Mike Ashley took exception to, which I was absolutely delighted that he took exception to it, because that was the whole point of the thing, was to ruffle a lot of feathers. And I spent 12 months not being allowed in the press box at St James's Park and banned from the ground. But I knew enough people, having been round Newcastle United for as long as I've been round, that were quite willing to take me in upstairs into the hospitality suites so that I could watch Newcastle United in the hospitality suites. And I was really in despair when I got back in the press box, because the food's so much better in the hospitality suites. And I managed to get a lovely meal before the game and a glass of wine, and then watch the game, and it was absolutely gorgeous and I loved it. And then all of a sudden, after a year, the ban was lifted and I had to go downstairs to the limited food that is available in the press box. So it was a bit of a blow when I got back in. But yes, I was banned for a year during the Ashley regime.
Barry Hogan, good evening. He says, Steve, I want to ask you, what chances Willock got starting ahead of Joe Linton at the weekend? I don't believe Eddie will let it happen, no matter how poor Joe Linton's form is. Barry, I think every manager's got his favourites. I think Sean Longstaff is certainly a favourite of the gaffers, if you like. And I think, though, we might see a different Eddie Howe for lots of different reasons. He was brave enough, as Gibbo mentioned earlier, to make 3 substitutions at the weekend, which ultimately changed the game. And you know, it wasn't working. We were all standing there at Molineux hoping he wasn't going to leave at 65 minutes, which is, you know, seems to be like a bog standard time to make substitutions for most Premier League managers. But he didn't. He changed it. And I think he will have looked at what has happened this week at training with an extra steely eye, and will be making some tough decisions. If Isak's unfit, Gordon plays up front. That means Barnes will start, I would imagine. That leaves us, you know, still with a couple of places which are up for grabs, I think. Murphy didn't have the best of games last weekend. Longstaff didn't have the best of games last weekend. Joe Linton didn't have the best of games last weekend. Take your pick from those 3 to bring Willock back in. It just depends. It depends whether he's changed his form, whether he's changed his tactic away from home. Spenny put a comment in earlier about Newcastle losing lots of away games. Maybe that's the reason he's going for a different type of setup away from home. But press conference is going to be interesting tomorrow, Barry. As always, we won't get a great deal out of it, but at least we'll find out, who's fit and who's available. But yeah, I hope that answers your question. Go on, John.
The interesting thing, I'd mentioned Willock, hadn't we, earlier in the first half before the adverts, that he brings a different dimension to midfield. He now looks as if he's fit again. The interesting thing with Joe Linton, who I think, outside of his barnstormer against Southampton on the opening day of the season, has been strangely indifferent by his standards. Now, I'm led to believe that he has been carrying a groin strain that has hampered him from training a lot, and being a big lad, physically a big lad, you need to be trained up, else you become sluggish. And I think that showed in his play. So that if he wanted to bring Willock in and say play a midfield of Bruno, Tonali and Willock, there is the excuse there, and I'm using the word nicely with excuse, that you can say that Joe Linton has gone out because he's got to rest this groin strain he's been carrying, and it's a legit excuse, and it's not as the humiliation of dropping one of your blue chip players. But so you could put in Willock for Joe Linton on the left side of midfield and announce it as, not at the press conference incidentally, because he won't do that, but announcing it after the match down at Fulham when he's queried about his team selection, saying, well, we all know that he's played with the groin, and you can only play without training so long before it shows in your play. So he was pulled out of the firing line for Willock. So there is an excuse to do it. There's also an excuse for the way Joe's been playing, and that's got to be taken into account. But it's interesting. But we've mentioned it early on, didn't we, Steve? There's so many positions, Trippier or Livramento, Kelly or Hall, Tonali or Longstaff, Willock or Joe Linton, Murphy outside right or Barnes outside right if he's is fit to go with Gordon. There's plenty positions with plenty decisions to be made for by Eddie. And as you just mentioned there, I don't think that Murphy had one of his great games. He lasted in all the changes. He survived all the changes. But after his wonderful pre-season form, I think he's hit a level. He is a wonderful player off the bench, and you need squad players, and for me, that's what he is. But apart from that great run he made to set up the winner against Spurs up here, I think he's been quite average in season, Jacob. And therefore, I would hope that he doesn't start down there and bring him from the bench, which is his best position for me.
Yeah, Andy Cooper says under Eddie's reign, I think this is the first time he's had the ability to choose from so many midfield players. I think he would show how good a manager of players he is now. It's exciting times ahead. And Lewis Miley is back training as well, Andy. So that's another name to throw into the midfield mix, which is certainly backs up what you're saying. John Spence, thank you for becoming a YouTube member, mate, taking us back on. Much appreciated. Craig Lee says, Gibbo, what's your favourite place to take a walk in the Northeast?
Oh, well, on the wild side, I would say that's what I've done all my life in the Northeast. It used to be through the centre of town on the way to a nightclub. Now it's down the Tyne Valley with the wonderful views there are to see. Now, what that says about me, I'm not certain, but that's true. But I mean, I must console myself and say on the wild side is the thing that's always appealed to me consistently down the years.
Always stick with your first answer. Barry Hogan says, John, how do you, as a respected Northeast journal, feel about some of the questions Louise Taylor asks at the press conference? And somebody did ask earlier as well about just in general the kind of questions that are asked. I mean, I presume you watch it, John. You listen to it like we do. Do you sometimes cringe at some of your erstwhile colleagues' questions?
I don't want to mention Louise by name because I think it's terribly unfair. And, I'm part of the hack pack, and I don't think that dog should eat dog because that is poor. And it's poor for when you're mixing with these people. And really, you've got to refrain from it. As a generalization, I have said for an awful long time that I think press conferences these days are sanitized. You're only allowed X number of questions each, and then you've got to move on. You can't challenge the answer the manager gives. You've just got to accept it. Where I used to meet Joe Harvey every day when I covered Newcastle United for the Chronicle, every single day, not a press conference once a week. Every morning before training, I went and saw Joe at St. James's Park, and I saw him in a one-on-one situation. And if I asked him a question and he gave an airy-fairy answer, I would say, Joe, that is not the question I asked you, mate. The question I asked you was this. Now, will you answer the question I asked you, etc., etc. And sometimes he would answer it off the record, but it marked your card, and sometimes he would answer it on the menu. Now, if he didn't like you wouldn't get a one-on-one, so you were in the biggest trouble in the world. But I prefer to live with my wits, and the good journalists today do exactly that as well. And I could name who they are, and I'm not going to. The ones that do the job properly and do it magnificently, because there's whatever era you get for footballers or for journalists or anything else, you get the good, the average, and the poor. That's natural. But the way press conferences are handled now, for example, you can be an absolute dodo, or you can be terrified of your own shadow and just sit there, never ask a question, but you write down the same answers as those brave ones that do ask the questions. So you can get away with murder. In the old days, you wouldn't have existed if you weren't capable of looking after yourself. So it does leave a lot to be desired, in my humble opinion, these days.
Newcastle United are looking to extend their unbeaten Premier League record this season to 5 games on Saturday, 3 o'clock kickoff down at Craven Cottage. Eddie Howe's side are looking for their 3rd victory of this calendar year as well at Craven Cottage. 2-0 in the FA Cup, of course, 1-0 in the Premier League in April. And since that single goal reverse in 2016-17 Championship season, Newcastle United have won 5 successive games at Craven Cottage in all competitions. The away end, as always, will be packed to the rafters. 2,300 away end tickets have been sold out. And team news, obviously mentioned Alexander Isak could miss out at the weekend. We're not 100% sure yet. We do know Jamal Lascelles, Sven Botman, Lewis Miley, Callum Wilson all remain sidelines. Bit early for Fulham's team news as well. Carlos Vinicius is out with a calf issue. Newcastle, of course, had a free week this week to prepare for the game, whilst Fulham visited Championship side at Preston North End in the Carabao Cup. It was a 1-1 draw. That was followed by an epic penalty shootout that Fulham lost 16-15. Marco Silva's side have begun the season with a 1-0 loss at Manchester United, 2-1 home victory over Leicester City, and draws against West Ham and Ipswich. Referee for this weekend is Peter Banks from Liverpool. He took charge of a 2-2 draw between us and West Ham in October last year, and VAR is Robert Jones. I'm not at this one this weekend, John, but I certainly will be keeping an eye on it. Hopefully, Newcastle can continue the run. I personally feel we'll have some capital success. It'll depend on the changes. It depends who's available. I genuinely think that he will make a couple of changes. I think Isak will be enforced, but I think there will be one more change in the midfield. I'm not sure what he's going to do, but I would imagine he would probably go for Willock or Tonali in that starting lineup. Which one? I think it's a toss of a coin. I think Willock's injuries are probably going to rule him back onto the bench. The fact that he's coming back tentatively from injuries. So I think he'll be kept as an impact sub. I think we might see Barnes and Tonali start. And I think he'll take out of the equation Joe Linton. And I think Alexander Isak, if he's injured, will be replaced up front by Anthony Gordon, giving Barnes the opportunity to start. So I'm going to go for those 2 changes. And I'm going to go for Newcastle to win 2-1. I think it'll be another tight game, just like the Wolves game. But I think Newcastle will come back victorious. Another 3 points in the bag. Hope that Man City and Arsenal draw on Sunday. Newcastle top of the league. And then when we play Man City the following week, we'll get a chance to extend our league at the top of the table, John.
Now, that sounds absolutely wonderful. I'll fly through the rest of the night on a cloud of optimism. And you can follow the logic in it all, though. You really can. I mean, Fulham do not strike fear into the hearts of good teams. And we, on our position alone, 3rd top and unbeaten, are a good team. And they do not strike fear. The only side of the so-called Super Six that they've played this season, Man U, they've lost to them, albeit it was only 1-0 and they were a bit unlucky, but Man United are like that. So they don't strike fear into us whatsoever. I think the biggest certainty is that we will remain unbeaten. It's a matter of whether we draw or whether we win. And I do believe that we will win. And I could have easily gone for 2-1, the same as you, but just to make it a bit different, I'll go for 2-0. But we don't care. If it's 1-0, I'll be absolutely delighted. I do believe that we will win. We need to win to go top on Saturday night. That is guaranteed if we win. And then you saying if we can get this other result on Sunday. But I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful to be playing a week on Saturday at home to Manchester City, and we're talking about us topping them second in a match at St James's Park? I mean, even this early in the season, that is absolutely fabulous. And what we've said every single game, Steve, we've said we won, but we haven't played well, have we? We've won, but we haven't played well, have we? I tell you what, it's a bloody good habit to have, winning when you're not playing well. I'll settle for we're not playing well at Fulham, as long as we win 2-1, 2-0, 1-0. And by the way, we can repeat that at home to Man City. I don't give a monkeys. I mean, I'm looking at what's happening to Spurs, and that's producing a smile on the face as wide as the Tyne Bridge. I'm taking us to win 2-0, and so let's hope both of us are right, my friend.
Great stuff. Get well soon, Super Mac. Hopefully back next week. And John, have a good night tonight. Take care. See you next week, pal.
God bless. Take care. Bye, fellas.